So yeah, we saw Ant-Man and the Wasp in Quantumania. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. And you can find a pre-order link in the show notes below for I Am Stan, and also at that same link you can pre-order the softcover version of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
Follow me on Instagram at cinema_tube.
So yeah, Ant-Man and the Wasp in Quantumania. It didn't occur to me until, the end of the movie, the end credits, that the word Ant-Man fits inside of Quantumania.
I didn't realize that till
yeah,
right
till
now,
right now, yeah.
Dude, we saw some stingers too.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see the wrestler sting or the singer. It was more Marvel stingers.
Yes, I had seen something where it's like, oh, you have to see, you have to watch Loki. You have to watch all of Loki before you watch Quantumania. And so I watched, I had watched most of Loki, but I didn't quite finish it. So then I went back after we'd seen the movie. I went back and watched it, and it's like they do introduce Kang there, and they introduce that kind of stuff. But it was actually more interesting watching it, in that order, in reverse order, because, then it was kind of like, oh, there's the guy, there's the guy I just saw, and so now I get to see, as opposed to if I had just seen it as it unfolded, I'd kind of be like, okay, well, who cares,
I was, I haven't watched any of Loki yet, mm-hmm. So it was cool. I thought it was cool seeing Kang pop up in there, and I wasn't familiar with the character too.
Oh, you weren't? Okay.
So thanks for filling me in, and also you made that great video on the channel that you did where
right,
really,
the first appearance of Kang. I want to do a larger Kang one and do some Kang's greatest hits. Ooh. So I have some other issues pulled of some cool Kang moments. Yeah, it was he's a really cool character, and I always really liked him. I really loved his design. I was introduced to him when there was the superpowers. I keep calling it superpowers. I was introduced to him when there was the Secret Wars toy line.
Okay.
And his was just this really cool looking toy. He has this great Jack Kirby design. I was like, what's that guy's deal? And then reading some of the comics. It's a very cool idea for a character that he travels through time. He's from a utopian future, but then he spent some time in ancient Egypt. He spent some time in a post-apocalyptic future, and so he's kind of gathered up all those different elements of an Egyptian pharaoh, of sort of a utopian super science, and then this kind of Mad Max kind of world, and kind of fused it all together.
Great seeing was. My brain is rotting. Was Michelle Pfeiffer in other Ant-Man films?
That was yeah. I think again, I need to go back and rewatch the Ant-Man stuff, because I thought I guess she did kind of thinking back. I think it was at the end of maybe the previous Ant-Man movie, or maybe at the end of one of the Avengers movies or something. She shows back up.
Okay. And we would just watch Batman Returns, so we were getting full Pfeiffer.
Yeah, lots of Pfeiffer. And she, I think she just kind of shows up, for a minute at the end of, Ant-Man 2 or, one of the Avengers movies or something, before Paul Rudd, turns into dust or something. Okay. I think it was something like that. But I had kind of forgotten that she came back. I knew we got a glimpse of her, but I didn't know she came back. So I thought this movie was going to be, they were going to go into the quantum realm to, rescue Michelle Pfeiffer and bring her back. But it's it starts and it's oh no, she's been back for a while. She's part of the family,
And she, I got, with the ants being blown up, I got some Honey, I Shrunk the Kids vibes.
Yeah, have you seen any of the other Ant-Man movies?
I think I've seen all of them.
All of them. Okay, yeah, because that was kind of the first one. Was a lot of that. The first one was kind of we're gonna impress you with this tiny guy in these sort of recognizable settings. So it's he's in a bathtub and you see the big globules of water coming. So it's kind of cool seeing ordinary things from a different viewpoint and stuff.
Always fun.
Yeah, and hanging out with the ants and stuff.
And then I went into this completely cold, so I had no idea that Bill Murray shows up in the movie.
I had heard that and then forgotten it. So it was, and hearing him say, mechanized organism designed only for killing. I was like, what? You know, that's
Your brain broke. You're
it's
like,
yeah.
surreal.
MODOK was like the big standout thing. Like that whole story, that whole Quantumania movie. It's kind of like one of my favorite tropes. Like one of my favorite, you know, sort of I don't know if it's a subgenre or trope would be the right word for it, but it's like when the characters kind of like take a break. They're in their normal setting, and maybe they have their big story going on, and then they get like zapped to some other dimension, or they get shrunken down to or you know sent to some far distant planet or something where they're completely out of their element in an alien world that has its own story going on, and they're
Super
kind of
fun.
pulled into it. I love that trope, and like I did my own version of it. Me and Joe Casey with Godland, we did a comic like back in 2008. It was because like in Godland, like we kind of had like our first 12 issues, which were like this big, continuous story, and then at the end of issue 12, like there's this big explosion, and like the hero and the villain both kind of like disappear, and and presumed dead, and then it's like issue 13 was like. It was called Jailed in Dimension Z, and we created this like Dimension Z. It was this like crazy like other universe, and they're both like kind of imprisoned, and then they have to like join forces and do like a prison break, and there's all these crazy characters.
That's amazing.
So like yeah, it was kind of it made me think of that like that was my trying my hand at this sort of subgenre, and then like Marvel in 2013 did. They created a Dimension Z. They called it Dimension Z and everything. It was like but it was like the same kind of trope. It was Captain America gets sent to Dimension Z, and
Jesus H. Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
Christ
I mean,
on the cross.
It could be a coincidence. It's possible. It's possible. It's a coincidence, or Dimension, because it's like Marvel had like, or DC, like Kirby had like a Dimension X in his
I love it, the Dimension X.
Yeah, Dimension X. So like in it was in like Green Arrow, his like Green Arrow stories, and I think he's maybe used it in some of his sci-fi stuff. There might even be like a Dimension X in Fantastic Four. So we were kind of playing around with like like what do you do Dimension, and like Dimension Z just sounded so cool. We're like, this is perfect, so we did it. But it sounded so cool that Marvel ended up using it too, like 5 years later. But I mean that story, like despite the fact they took our name, despite that fact, it was a pretty cool story. It was like Captain America, and he's in this other weird world. And you know what it is? It's like it's an opportunity to do like a Wizard of Oz or like a Alice in Wonderland, where like sometimes it's even like uses the same cast as like the regular thing, but then they're like. There's so many
they're versions of them.
Like there was a Mork and Mindy episode where Mork gets some kind of disease, some kind of like Orkin disease, and it makes him shrink, and he keeps shrinking. Like first he's like like a foot smaller than Mindy, and then little by little he keeps getting smaller and smaller, and then eventually he like shrinks into like oblivion. He shrinks into nothing, and he starts tumbling naked because he shrinks out of his clothes. He tumbles naked through this like darkness, and then it's like to be continued. It's like one of those two-parters, and then part 2 he like lands, he like just is falling and like lands in this like lake or something, and he's in it's like an Alice, he's like in some other some miniature microscopic world, and it is like all the people from instead of Mindy it's Mandy, and then instead of Exodore the guy's name is Exadown, and he's kind of like the emperor of this place where like everybody has to be sad, and but again it's like I
love that subgenre.
Yeah, it is cool. You can like press the reset button and do something different. And I thought in Ant-Man and Wasp they did a good job of like still still bringing in sort of the family story,
yes,
and some the stakes and the familiarity, and then so it wasn't just like a completely like isolated like his whole cast comes with him.
Michael Douglas, I forget how like you don't see him in too many things these days, so I'm like I love Michael Douglas too.
He's like, yeah, he was good. He was good. It was good seeing them, and they had this.
I'm still kicking.
They had this like familiarity. Yeah, like that's what I was kind of looking for. Like, I was kind of studying Michael Keaton. I was kind of studying Michael Douglas because I was kind of like trying to see like, okay, has he turned into Kirk Douglas? You know how sometimes somebody like ages into like looking like their parents or whatever. I was kind of trying to get a close, and he still looks like Michael Douglas. Like maybe there's like a little bit of Kirk Douglas. I mean, of course he's got Kirk Douglas's voice. He's always kind of had
that iconic voice. Yeah, because he was like. He keeps saying like greed is good. And
right. Yeah.
He's on a cell phone or like an early cell phone. He's like greed is good. Paul.
I mean, like Michael Douglas has had such a great career, and there's like so much stuff you could talk to him about. But I do wonder if like when he's on the set, if people are just like barraging him with questions about his dad. You know?
Oh yeah, like. He's like, all right, you want to talk to me about disclosure? And I'm like, tell me your dad stories about Kirk, please.
Yeah. Everybody's like, I am Spartacus.
He's like, great.
I am Spartacus.
I am Spartacus. You don't want to talk to me about with some like a Michael Douglas deep guy like disclosure.
Right. You don't want to talk to me about the game.
The game. Like, how was it like working with Fincher?
So, did your dad have any stories about tough guys? And working on the set with Dana Carvey. It becomes more of like a Star Trek or a Star Wars or something, which again is like one of my favorite genres. And it's like, there's like the reset every episode or every show or whatever. Okay, new planet. Here's a chance to like sort of reinvent everything. I
love
a bunch
that.
of stuff. Yeah,
like that was my favorite. One of the best parts of the movie was seeing those alien creatures that just gave me like that. It had a Star Wars feel that I haven't been really getting from some of the Star Warsy stuff.
Because like Star Wars, they always have like the cantina scene. They always have like a scene where there's a ton of crazy aliens, but there's, it's not like Luke goes to a planet and there's like a ton of crazy aliens. It's always it's like kind of. But this was like you're just thrown into like in this movie, it was the quantum realm, which is like they keep talking about it's like the stand-in for the microverse. The microverse the microverse was like actually established by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee in the 60s in the Fantastic Four. They like shrink down and they go to this kingdom. Sometimes they would call it in those early issues they would call it the microverse. They referred to themselves as micronauts.
Oh, I love
They say like we're the first micronauts. They say microverse. They say micronauts, and then they call it subatomica, and then the name subatomica sticks, and it becomes subatomica for a while going forward. But then in the 70s when Bill Mantlo starts doing Micronauts, he like resurrects that microverse name and starts calling it the microverse and talking about Micronauts. But then somehow in like when Marvel and Mego, when Marvel and the Micronauts go their separate ways, it's like the Micronauts took the name Micronauts with them and they took the name Microverse with them. But Micronauts and Microverse were there in the Fantastic Four, like back in the 60s.
That's awesome. If somebody ever like asked me like, they're like, what's your favorite word or whatever, I would say if I had to list like 10 of my favorite words, Micronaut falls.
Yeah, Micronaut's a good. Micronaut is I'd agree. That's up there for me. Like Godzilla is like
I love
Godzilla's like my favorite word. After that is maybe Frankenstein.
Frankenstein's
those
on those lists too.
But yeah, Micronaut's up there. These are great words.
Great words.
And so like they call it it's called the quantum realm, but and Marvel owns some of the stuff that was created for the Micronauts comic, and then the owner of the Micronauts license or whatever they own, I guess, which is Hasbro now. I think Hasbro owns Micronauts now, and so they own the rest of it. So like to use all of it, they have to come together, but then they have to call it the quantum realm so they can have. So maybe we'll see some of that Micronaut kind of stuff that Marvel owns showing up.
That would be amazing.
And like they had Kang as the big bad guy, not Krang from the Ninja Turtles.
I get for a split second, I'm like, I start salivating.
Yeah, right. But they had Kang, but there's a villain that's kind of like even more tailor-made for that situation, which I guess like they went with Kang because I think they're setting him up for bigger things. Like there's another, like the next Avengers movie, Kang is going to be the big villain.
Okay, and that makes sense.
So like they're setting it up for a bigger thing. So I guess that's why they used him. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was a draft of this script where the villain was a villain called Psycho Man, it's another character
Amazing.
from like the '60s, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee for the Fantastic Four, and he was like the big villain, like the sort of conqueror of the Microverse for them, and super cool design, and Kirby's original Kirby came up with the character and called him Psycon.
That's another
Which is
cool,
super
that's
cool name.
So cool.
And when I did Fantastic Four Grand Design, I called him Psycon. But then Stan changed it to Psycho Man. I guess to like capitalize on the movie Psycho or something. But he called him he changed the name to Psycho Man. So that's the name that stuck. Like Psycon is only on like Jack Kirby's original art. It doesn't like show up in the comics except for Fantastic Four Grand Design.
He's like Psycho Sid Vicious.
So this guy would have been and like Psycho Man, he can grow to be like our size or whatever, but then he can shrink down. But the thing is, like, it's a suit. So like the psycho man that you would meet in like on the streets of New York or whatever in the Fantastic Four actually has a tiny microscopic Psycho Man inside, and his body is just like a ship that he pilots.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah.
That's so fucking cool.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
So that would have been cool. Like that would have made that would have fit like a glove. Again, Kang was good. I thought he was good, but Psycho Man is sort of like the villain that is really like designed for, but maybe maybe next time they revisit the quantum realm, it'll be
that's
Psycho Man.
so cool. I love that idea. Yeah, like he's like it's a human ship. He's like
Yeah, it's like a giant space. It's such a great like couple of issues, and then they have a couple. The Fantastic Four have like a couple tussles with him, and then the Silver Surfer needs to hide out from Galactus because Galactus wants to. Silver Surfer has rebelled against Galactus. He won't work for him anymore. But now Galactus is getting real desperate. He needs to eat a planet, and he needs Silver Surfer to help him find one. So he comes to Earth looking for the Silver Surfer. So Silver Surfer hides, and he hides in the Microverse. So then they go on some big adventure where they're trying to track him down and stuff. So there's a lot of cool Microverse stuff. And then when Bill Mantlo and Michael Golden started doing the Micronauts comic, sort of like their last issue together teases like the introduction of like the Fantastic Four coming in, kind of like picking kind of closing the loop of like the Fantastic Four being the people who discovered the Microverse. They come back in, and then like they're gonna go up against Psycho Man, and then Michael Golden leaves, and Howard Chaykin takes over, and so it kind of goes different. But again, so a lot of deep
there's
comic
so
stuff.
much stuff like on the table still to like. You know what? Like I was just after seeing Ant-Man, I was trying to think back on like what are some of my favorite Marvel movies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why like Ant-Man Quantumania like. I just hit.
Yeah, it was good. It was fun. Like again, like I said, it's a genre, it's a subgenre or trope that I like. So it was working for me. One thing though, like one thing that kind of worked against it for me is that it's got this like crazy exotic world, and like I feel like when we saw Avatar 2, like the world in Quantumania is like more interesting to me than the world in Avatar 2, but the world in Avatar 2, even though it wasn't quite as interesting or exotic, it was more convincing. Like I was more caught up in the reality of this, where I was just kind of in Quantumania, I was just kind of like enjoying it, but sort of saw the artifice for like it wasn't as convincing. Obviously, like they didn't spend the kind of time or money or resources on this that Cameron did.
Yeah, because like what was Cameron like? Was that like is it a decade in the?
Yeah, it's like they probably spent like 2 years on this, and he spent a decade
on that.
You can't. But it did kind of, having recently watched that, it kind of paled, and then also having just seen Everything Everywhere All at Once. The family drama was good in this, but like Everything Everywhere All at Once, the family drama was like so central to all the like sort of action adventure stuff, and so it's like I came off these two movies that operate in similar areas to this that kind of I think did it a little better.
Yeah, because it's like we just rocked out two great ones. Yeah, you're right. They only have 2 years. James Cameron, even over a decade.
Yeah.
13 years.
Like I've noticed people are coming down hard on this movie, and I think it's unwarranted. Like I think it's just that like we're just kind of spoiled. Like we've been getting like all these great superhero movies, and it's like but you do kind of have to take a step back and like maybe there's a fatigue setting in or whatever, but you got to take it. Like they did a good job with this.
Yeah.
Like it turned out good. It hit the spot. It was funny. The action adventure was cool. Again, MODOK is like the big thing. The big thing of it, and like for me, MODOK, like I think they used him in an interesting way that kind of was like a callback to like the villain from the first movie, kind of
Yeah.
helped close some loose ends and stuff with this.
I don't know much about like MODOK's like his story, but I always thought he was one of my favorite looking characters in Marvel comics.
Yeah, I mean it's a Kirby design, and Kirby just did an amazing job with MODOK, and he's always been one of my favorite Kirby designs. Very unique, very cool. I kind of want to go back and go through like it's an archetype Kirby does this. It's a type of character he does where he takes a character where it's like a giant head. And then like
great.
Does and he's been doing it like since the earliest days of his career, and he did another one for Marvel in the 70s. Like MODOK was a 60s character, and then in the 70s he did Arnim Zola and stuff. So it's like but it was always a really cool look, and that was one thing that like I didn't like about the MODOK in this. Like they definitely played him for comedy, and I think they deliberately made him like look silly and ridiculous, and to me that was kind of like low-hanging fruit, but I mean I get it, and it worked in that way. It's just as a fan of MODOK, like I want to see that super badass cool Kirby design MODOK. And again, MODOK, it's kind of a ridiculous character to begin with, but Kirby really sold like the menace and like the design. Again, it's like real easy to get that design wrong, and Kirby just has a way, like everything was in the right spot, the eyes, everything. When Kirby designed it, his first appearance, it's like a two-parter Captain America story where he first shows up, and the first story you just keep hearing about MODOK. You don't hear him. You don't see him. You just keep hearing about him. And everybody's like, oh no, MODOK's on the way. MODOK's on the way.
God.
And then you see his face on a screen, and it's all staticky, and it's like I'm MODOK. I'm like, oh no. And then issue 2, you get the reveal of MODOK, and he's just like, and you see him, and you're like, whoa, your eyes bulge, at this design, and he's just like deadly, and like there's like nothing Captain America can do to beat him. It's like set up so beautifully, and you're not going to get that in an Ant-Man movie. Like maybe if he showed up in Captain America: Winter Soldier, or something, like if he showed up in a movie that has a different tone, but he shows up. He's in the Ant-Man universe, so it's going to sort of skew towards comedy, and so it's going to skew towards the annoying orange, towards Thumb Wars. He's going to look more that way. Like it was played for comedy, and they put in a little bit of pathos too, but it was mostly for comedy. Like I mean, that's just they have different. That was their goal, with this movie.
I was trying to think of Thumb Wars during the movie, and I was like. I forgot. I was like, what the hell is that? I forgot about Thumb.
Yeah, like they kind of,
so
because looking at him, I was kind of like, he looks so bad, but it's like, well, they placed his features for comedy. They want him to look like Humpty Dumpty. And I guess Humpty Dumpty is, could be one of the starting points, for MODOK. But like, Jack Kirby was kind of like, what if I made a super cool sci-fi terrifying Humpty Dumpty, and then with this they just sort of did like straight Humpty Dumpty.
He's up on the wall, Humpty Dumpty, he pulls 2 lasers out and starts like frying everybody.
But I could see somebody who doesn't have any kind of baggage coming in with MODOK coming into this movie, and like MODOK's their favorite part. Also, you save money on your special effects budget. Like it costs less to make a funny, like dumb looking MODOK. It costs a lot more money to make a badass looking.
Oh
MODOK.
yeah, like because CGI skews toward the stupid.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
it's like its state. It wants to. Its natural state is to look crappy.
Right, exactly. You have to like. Yeah, exactly. That's if left in the state of nature, it'll look stupid. But if you have to apply a lot of effort to make it look cool. I thought Kang was really good. The actor who played Kang was really good.
Oh yeah, great job. And I was going back to thinking about like my favorite Marvel movies. I think one of my favorite casts is in the Ant-Man movie. Yeah. I kind of like seeing Paul Rudd with Michael Douglas and like everybody they have in these movies. I'm like I like the group they've assembled for these Ant-Man.
Like I know Ant-Man was always a personal favorite of Stan Lee's, and he felt like it had a lot of potential to like be something and just kind of, you know, like, and so it's finally getting its day. And Ant-Man, like with Paul Rudd in the role and stuff, and the storyline of you know, of Ant-Man being kind of down on his luck, kind of a loser and kind of comedic and wise, like that is a big part of like the appeal of Marvel. Like that's something unique to Marvel that you would get with like Spider-Man, or you would get with like the Thing in the Fantastic Four, and it's kind of been absent from a lot of the Marvel movies, you know?
Yeah, everyone's kind of like like not really high status, but like not too many.
Exactly. Like Captain America is like, you know, he's everybody's hero. Everybody worships him, and then you know, Thor is like a literal god. But then it's like, to have a kind of down on your luck, kind of like an everyman, you know, who kind of quips and stuff.
And even like, even Robert Downey Jr.'s like alcoholism in the Iron Man movies wasn't really like. They didn't really lean too hard. They
didn't. Like I feel like the alcoholism is more like, if you're familiar with Iron Man, and if you're familiar with Robert Downey Jr., you're kind of more tuned into the alcoholism. But like, what's actually like in the movies is like pretty minimal.
Tame.
Yeah,
he's like, I just had 2 buds. Oh jeez. I give it 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs. Are you allowed to give 2 thumbs? Like I thought, like Siskel gives 1 thumb up. Ebert gives 1 thumb up, and then together it's 2 thumbs up.
We give 1. I'll give an R up. You give a T up. And thinking back, like this is up there just because of the time I had at the movies. And
like that was kind of like Black Adam got extra points for that too, because it was just like a good time at the movies. Yeah,
and I love Iron Man 3. It's one of my favorite Marvel movies.
That's funny. Well, you're a Shane Black fan in general, right?
Yeah. And I also love, in my top 5, one of the Captain America, the Joe Johnston Captain America.
I love the Joe Johnston Captain America. Yeah, that's
it's
like
really great.
I love that one. That one's you know, and like Winter Soldier is kind of like the one that gets a little more, because Winter Soldier is extremely ambitious.
Yeah,
it's super long with like a ton of cool stuff, and it's very awesome. But like the first one, the Joe Johnston one, just speaks to me. It has like a Rocketeer vibe, you know, for obvious reasons. Kind of has like a Raiders of the Lost Ark vibe. You know, it just some of like, I like when these Marvel movies feel like an old-fashioned movie, like where they have kind of like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. That felt like an old-fashioned movie, like the first one. The Joe Johnston, of course, like Joe Johnston, he's like a classic director, and like, you know, working with George Lucas and stuff.
He's in that coaching tree, the Spielberg tree,
exactly,
with Joe Dante. And
so so it makes sense, you know. So his, but they are sort of my favorite ones.
Yeah, and I like the first Iron Man too.
I like the first Iron Man. Yeah, really like setting the stage for all of this. Iron Man 3, it felt like an 80s movie, which you know again, Shane Black, you know,
Pittsburgh zone,
exactly. So like it does have sort of like the Lethal Weapon type scenes in it.
Oh my gosh, it's a Shane Black staple of having like a helicopter attack like a house on a beach, like Briggs's trailer in part 2, Tom Atkins getting sniped through the eggnog in part 1, and then like.
And it's got the good twist. It's got like the anti-climax. Like after all, because it's like all the Marvel movies, you're kind of like this setting up for like a big battle with the big bad guy, and then this is like misdirects you. But for Quantumania, like I was talking about Iron Man 3, but Quantumania. The climax of these Marvel movies so often are like CGI fest, and so you kind of
lose the stakes.
Yeah, you lose the stakes. But this one kind of builds towards an old-fashioned fist fight, which I like. That was the most connected I felt to like sort of a final battle or whatever in a Marvel movie in a while, because it kind of broke down to like, you know,
mono. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, because like I mean, in the movie like Transformers or like the or the Marvel movies, the executives or whoever they're like sourcing, they're like, we want to go bigger and bigger, and the bigger it gets and the more crap going on, the less you're like, I'm like, I don't know what's good, but then I just bring it in, just bring it.
Yeah, because I mean, Quantumania has like this big cast of thousands, epic battle. You know, like one of the Avengers movies. It has like the big battle. But then it strips down and you get the stakes. That was like the first Wonder Woman movie. that was like a big, like, because I thought they did a really good job with that movie, but then it's like it culminates in this like CGI battle, and it's like, oh man, if only.
If only. And like they did a good bringing it in smaller in Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A great battle at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, like
that was
on the beach.
On the beach, that was
that
great.
was a good
I was
one,
like,
yeah.
this is what I'm looking for.
I think they finally like figured that out. That like you can't you got to have like, or you can have whatever kind of CGI and craziness you want in your movie, but when it comes to like the crunch, you got to have
when it comes
real,
to crunch time,
real people doing real stuff.
Great battle at the end. Kang.
It felt like they were going for like a Darth Vader with him, and so he kind of has.
Definitely.
We got the whole journey of Darth Vader like in one movie, because it's like he has his sort of like vulnerable scenes, and he has his like space tyrant scenes, and then he like sort of all in one movie, as opposed to like spacing it.
I was really feeling Star Wars,
Yeah.
and I thought like I was feeling Vader too. Mm-hmm. He was force choking people.
Yeah.
How come Bill Murray wasn't there saying like he's like Quantumania or like he's like mad?
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's like they're going for Star Wars, and then it's like, hey, let's get Bill Murray, the guy who who made the words to the Star Wars theme.
Near and far wars.
Yeah. And you could like, it's so funny because Bill Murray is like just so discreetly, like it's like he's just placed in the movie and then removed from the movie. Like,
I know.
He's just so
In and out.
It's because I thought like, oh, we're gonna see him later, or maybe he's gonna become like the big bad or whatever. And it's like, no, they had him for a day in front of a green. He probably filmed it at home.
Oh yeah, that is so funny. I would see like when I see like a commercial or something with some like big celebrity, like I'm like they were probably just not even in the same room together.
We watched Ant-Man and the Wasp in Quantumania, and good time at the movies. We enjoyed it, and
we'll totally recall seeing you at the movies.
Yeah. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. And there is a pre-order link in the show notes below for I Am Stan, and you can also at that same link pre-order the softcover edition of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli, or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
Follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.
And check out my Patreon. Go to patreon.com and search Tom Scioli to support my Patreon, and you can have access to a whole archive of different comics that I've worked on, and posting new stuff pretty frequently there too.
Follow the show on Instagram at total_recall_show.
And yeah, we'll see you.